The emergency room unfolded like a chaotic symphony, filled with the relentless beeping of monitors, the hurried footsteps of medical staff, and the sharp scent of antiseptic. Dr. Helena Moretti had long mastered the art of tuning out the chaos as she navigated her surroundings. With a precision honed by years of experience, her mind danced 2 steps ahead as patients flowed in and out, their destinies intertwined in fleeting moments of medical choices. Some she could rescue, others not, slipped through her fingers, leaving behind the echoes of what once was. Yet nothing had ever steeled her against the sharp ache of loss. A life unfolded as she found herself immersed in the details of a patient chart. When the ER doors swung open and a gurney was wheeled in, amidst the chaos, paramedics shouted, their voices rising above the turmoil. Blood stained a navy blue tactical vest, seeping into the fabric, a stark reminder of the urgency of the moment. Like ink dispersing in water, a gunshot wound to the left shoulder, a clean passage, enduring the pain while shielding a paw. In a tense moment, one of the paramedics conveyed his message, his voice sharp with urgency. Addressing Helena, cast a fleeting look at the patient's expression before transitioning into professional mode, noting the declining blood pressure, 90/60. Damn it! Helena moved fast. Get her to trauma 1. Start a line. Push. As the fluids flowed, they carefully moved the patient to the table, and in that moment, Helena finally gained clarity. Observe her. The woman was breathing heavily, her strong features taut with pain, dark eyes half closed yet piercing. Despite the blood loss, the name on her badge read Captain Sofia Almeida, and, despite her evident injuries, she managed to smirk. "You're bossy," she murmured, her voice heavy with fatigue. Helena cast a flat gaze her way, urgency lacing her words. "You're bleeding out. Try not to flirt while I'm saving your life." Sophia let out a weak chuckle, but it transformed into a wince. Helena brushed aside the flutter in her stomach caused by the unexpected teasing and concentrated on. The bullet had inflicted damage, yet the exit wound remained pristine. Still, her body. Helena was slipping into a state of mild shock, a scene she had witnessed before. Courageous souls, fueled by adrenaline, those who believed themselves untouchable until their own flesh turned against them. She applied the gauze to the injury with a steady hand. As their eyes met, a sense of impending pain loomed. Sophia maintained her stare, an unspoken understanding passing between them. The flickering remained indecipherable. "My dear." As the worst of it unfolded, Helena pressed down firmly, while Sophia looked on. She hissed between her teeth, yet her gaze remained fixed. A tense moment lingered between them, something Helena found difficult to define. Then, just as swiftly as it had emerged, she cast it aside. With deft hands, she stitched Sophia up, her concentration unwavering, after addressing the wound and stabilizing her vitals. Once the bleeding was under control and the worst had passed, she took a step back. Helena insisted to the nurse that she would not be leaving this place today. Sophia let out a frustrated groan, while Helena stood firm, arms crossed, asserting her stance with unwavering resolve. "I've faced worse. Helen," I shot her a pointed look. "And yet, here you are, still very much human. You'll be remaining here for observation." Sophia examined her as if she were a character in a shadow play. She could certainly make her case, but Helena remained steadfast. With a theatrical sigh, Sophia allowed her head to drop in resignation, back onto the pillow. "All right, but only because you asked so sweetly." Helena dismissed the warmth blossoming in her chest at the playful tone. This woman was trouble. As she walked away, the sensation lingered. Sophia felt the weight of a gaze upon her back, and for reasons she preferred not to dissect, she found herself stealing one last glance. Sophia Almeida loathed hospitals, the pungent scent of sterility, the harsh glare of fluorescent lights overhead, the incessant beeping of machines sent shivers down her spine. She had endured years, evading danger, bursting through barriers, and emerging from shootouts with barely a mark, the notion of existing, trapped in a bed, monitored by the ever-watchful gaze of physicians, was a torment greater than any physical injury she'd ever encountered. And then there was her doctor, Helena, more than Eddie Sophia had ever met. Numerous practitioners in her era, many of them either excessively detached to show concern or too fatigued to take an interest. Yet there was a distinct sharpness in her, a quiet intensity that Sophia recognized. All too well, the woman had practically commanded her to remain in this wretched hospital. Sophia shifted in bed, testing. The discomfort in her shoulder made it clear she had no desire to linger any longer than needed. As if drawn by an invisible force, with a sense of defiance, the door swung open, and Helena stepped inside. clipboard in hand, her attire pristine white. With her coat crisp and an expression unreadable, Sophia smirked. "Miss me already?" Helena didn't even blink. "You're meant to be resting. I am simply very alert." Helena stood upright, walking to her bedside, where she realized she had lost something significant. The volume of blood lost can lead to shock if one attempts to leave before the body has adequately recovered. It may seem dramatic, but it is a serious concern. Sophia reclined against the pillows, observing Helena with a sense of playful intrigue. "Are you always this way with your patients, or just the particularly stubborn ones?" Helena's lips pressed together. "I don't," Sophia chuckled. "Well, I suppose that makes me special. Then, with my time for stubborn patients." Helena smiled in response, disregarded the remark about staying for at least one more night, promising to reassess your condition later. Sophia inclined her. She leaned in slightly, her eyes sharp, and said, "If you refuse, I'll have to sedate you." Sophia blinked, and then, despite her better judgment, she let out a laugh. This doctor was quite the character, unyielding, just as she was about to conjure another clever retort. A knock on the door shattered the moment an officer stood waiting outside. Entered, acknowledging Sophia with a nod. "Captain, I understand you're required to take it easy, but requesting a debrief on yesterday's operation." Sophia shot Helena, accompanied by a smug expression. It seems that responsibility beckons. Yet before she could swing her legs over the bed, Helena was already obstructing her way. "No," Sophia arched an eyebrow. "Excuse me, you're not departing from this bed for a debriefing only after I ensure your safety." The officer paused. With all due respect, the doctor was interrupted by Helena, whose gaze was so frigid it could freeze the ocean. Sophia let out a sigh, partly annoyed and partly impressed. She glanced at her colleague and shrugged. "I suppose I'm under doctor's orders." The officer sighed. "I'll inform the lieutenant." He cast an uncertain glance at Helena before departing. Once the door closed, Sophia trembled. She crossed her arms, her head held high. "You really don't take no for an answer, do you? If you're wise, you won't squander your energy on futile arguments." Sophia observed her for a moment, then broke into a grin. The document in hand. Helena remained unyielding, her expression unchanged, devoid of any warmth. She merely jotted down a note on her clipboard. Yet, as she turned to leave, Sophia noticed the faintest pause in her movements. A smirk played on her lips. This was going to be intriguing. Helena had encountered her share of challenging patients, but Sophia Almeida was in a category of her own. It had been 3 days since the officer's admission, and each encounter with it was a struggle. If she wasn't charming the nurses into granting her release, she was firing off sarcastic remarks concerning hospital protocols. Yet there was something about her that burrowed into Helena's mind, lingering in a way she couldn't fully dismiss. That night, as Helena completed her final rounds, she paused at Sophia's door, an inexplicable hesitation gripping her. There was no justification for her urge to check in. Her vitals were stable, and her recovery was on track. Yet something stirred within her. Helena pushed open the door. Inside, the room was dim, filled with the soft hum of monitors filled the quiet space. Sophia was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, one arm draped over her wounded shoulder, her back slightly bent. Yet for once, there was no arrogant quip, no playful grin, just a weary woman gazing at the lost in contemplation. Helena cleared her throat. "You're meant to be resting," she said. Sophia flinched slightly, but with a slow exhale, she remarked, "I didn't hear you coming." "Doc." Helena moved in closer, her tone steady. "Your shoulder will heal faster if you allow your body to rest." Sophia she let out a dry chuckle, rubbing a hand over her face. "Yeah, well, it turns out that resting isn't precisely my area of expertise." There was something in her tone, a quality that suggested she was addressing more than just the hospital, that captivated Helena. Pause. This was the first time Sophia sounded genuine, stripped of her defenses instead of pushing Helena. She softened her tone. After a long night, Sophia finally looked up at her. The dim light, her usual sharpness had faded, replaced by something heavier. Indeed, Helena paused for a moment before settling into the small chair next to the bed, her thoughts lingering on the troubling dreams that haunted Sophia. She exhaled through her nose, glancing away. Helena recognized that look. It was one she had encountered before in veterans and first responders, within herself. When she had lost patience, she couldn't save. "You don't have to tell me," Helena said gently, "but I've been around enough to understand that shouldering everything by oneself doesn't ease the burden." For a fleeting moment, she considered Sophia. She wouldn't answer. But then, in a voice softer than she'd ever heard from her, Sophia said, "I lost a partner once. Not on. He was injured in the line of duty during a raid. We managed to extract him and rushed him to the hospital, believing he would succeed." Helena sensed a tightening in her chest. As tightened, Sophia took a deep breath. The doctor revealed that he had suffered a crash, resulting in internal bleeding that went unnoticed until it was too late. The heaviness in her voice was undeniable. She held no resentment towards the doctors, only towards herself. Helena was all too familiar with that burden of guilt. She maintained a calm tone. "You know it wasn't your fault, right?" Sophia released a soft laugh, though it held no trace of amusement. "Of course. Convey that to my mind at 2 a.m. A beat of silence lingered between them for the first time since they met. Helena didn't perceive a resolute officer or a thrill-seeker. She recognized an individual burdened with too much weight and possessing, with no place to set it down. She had the option to turn away, to offer a typical comfort and depart. Yet, she chose to extend her hand instead, with a gentle touch on Sophia's uninjured shoulder. "You have rescued someone from despair. Night, didn't you?" Helena asked. Sophia looked at her, something flickering behind her eyes. Helena held her gaze. "That's what matters. For once, Sophia." She didn't argue, she simply nodded. And in the ensuing silence, an unspoken understanding lingered. There was an unspoken understanding lingering between them, a presence neither was prepared to acknowledge. Sophia found herself questioning the moment it had all occurred. Yet amidst the resolute confrontations and the hushed dialogues, Helena Moray had arrived at. Beneath her exterior, she felt unaccustomed to the way someone regarded her as more than merely a title in a role. And yet, every time Helena stepped into the room, a stirring sensation rippled through her chest. It had been a week since she had last been there, acknowledged that her shoulder was mending nicely, and Helena had ultimately approved her discharge. Yet rather than experiencing a sense of relief, Sophia stood by the nurse's station, a sense of disappointment creeping in as she adjusted the sling on her arm. Her arm rested as she observed Helena furiously jotting down notes on a chart, prompting Sophia to begin speaking with a laid-back vibe. "This is the moment we part ways." "Huh?" Helena kept her gaze down. "You still need follow-ups?" Sophia smirked. "I was expecting something more sentimental." Doc finally raised an eyebrow at Helena. Her eyes. "I don't indulge in sentimentality." Sophia tilted her head. "No, because the night had a certain weight to it." And Helena's body tensed, though it was hardly perceptible. Sophia leaned in a fraction, her posture shifting subtly as she lowered her. "Don't worry, Doc. Your secret is safe with me." Helena exhaled, revealing a hint of understanding beneath her words. With a playful roll of her eyes, she set her clipboard down. "You're impossible." Sophia grinned. "And yet you keep returning." Helena parted her lips, perhaps to contest, perhaps to divert, but before she could, the overhead speakers crackled to life, announcing the urgent call for all available units to report in the ER. As the entrance loomed ahead, an armed suspect emerged, hinting at a possible hostage situation. Helena's entire body tensed in response. Stiffness that lingered just beyond Sophia responded immediately as she extended her hand She reached for the radio, only to recall that she wasn't carrying it. Technically, she was still off duty, still a patient, but that didn't matter. Instinct surged within her as she began to approach the entrance. But Helen seized her good arm, declaring, "You are not running into danger with one arm in a sling." Helena hissed as she met Sophia's gaze. "There's a man with a firearm among innocent bystanders. What do you expect me to do? Just stand by and watch." Helena clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. When Sophia first caught a glimpse of something resembling fear in her expression, it caused her to pause. But then, a gunshot shattered the moment. The sound sliced through the air like a whip, sending hospital staff into a frenzy. Helena flinched, but Sophia remained unfazed. Already moving. "Stay here," she ordered. Helena didn't. She followed the ER. The entrance erupted into chaos as a man brandishing a pistol cornered a young nurse by the reception desk, his weapon flailing in a frantic display. Security personnel positioned themselves at a distance, hands elevated, striving to diffuse the tension in the air. Sophia's pulse quickened. One wrong move and this would end in blood. Slowly, she stepped forward, her voice steady and commanding. "Hey," she called out, "you don't want to do this." The man abruptly turned his head in her direction, the gun now aimed at her. Sophia raised her hands, palms facing outward. Okay, she said. "Just breathe. Let's talk." Helena was a few feet behind her, heart pounding. It wasn't law enforcement. She had no training for this. Yet, there was Sophia, the man's hands trembling, teetering on the edge of instability. A single wrong word could trigger him. Sophia's voice softened. I know you're scared, but hurting someone isn't the answer. To rectify whatever was amiss, the man's grip on the gun grew firmer. Sophia sensed the impending danger before it unfolded. He shifted with a deliberate intent. With a swift and decisive movement, Sophia lunged forward, seizing his wrist with her strong hand. With a swift motion of the arm, the weapon erupted with a sharp crack, unleashing a surge of pain that coursed through the air, through her shoulder. Yet she held on. The weapon clattered to the floor as security surged in, pinning the suspect down. Down. It was over. Sophia exhaled, the rush of adrenaline making her limbs shake. Warm hands cupped her face, and she barely had time to register Helena standing before her, inspecting her with concern. The doctor snapped. Are you insane? Sophia grinned. Technically, no. Helena looked on, prepared to end her life. You've just emerged from the hospital. What on earth were you contemplating? Sophia's smirk faded slightly. You'd be here to mend my wounds if things took a turn for the worse. Helena began to speak, ready to contest, but then she hesitated. Their expressions were intimate, almost suffocating, and for a fleeting moment, the universe faded away. Sophia's breath caught as Helena's hold on her face relaxed. Neither of them shifted, and in that moment, the thought of speaking hung in the air. Parting seemed an insurmountable challenge. Sophia ought to have been engulfed in anguish as her shoulder pulsed with discomfort, her body still thrumming with the aftershocks of adrenaline. The logical part of her mind insisted she had. She had pushed too hard once more, but that wasn't the reason she found herself frozen in place. It was Helena, her hands still lingering. Sophia's face radiated warmth and steadiness, anchoring her in a manner she hadn't anticipated amidst the sterile environment of the hospital. The sound of security radios crackled loudly as nurses moved with a purposeful urgency. Yet, the world within this moment was hushed as Helena gazed, her brows furrowed. Something stormy lurked behind her usually unreadable eyes. Sophia was uncertain, unsure if she had the answers she sought. The bravery to discover neither of them stirred, neither of them uttered a word. Then chaos ensued. She blinked, taking a sharp inhale, and as she pulled away, the warmth vanished, swiftly supplanted by the composed demeanor of the doctor, a figure Sophia had come to recognize. The words came forth. You need to sit down, Helena commanded with a voice that was firm yet wavering. While Sophia let out a breath, rolling her eyes, she shrugged off whatever that was with a playful smirk, her good shoulder moving with a casual confidence. No, thank you for saving my life. Helena's jaw tightened. You're infuriating. Sophia chuckled, though the laughter felt muted, for this was no longer mere banter. The atmosphere between them had transformed. She sensed it, and judging by Helena's avoidance of direct eye contact, she felt it as well. Helena moved with quiet determination, tending to Sophia's wound with swift, precise motions, carefully assessing for any signs of harm. Through the struggle, her fingers glided over Sophia's skin, both clinical and intimate. Yet it didn't seem that way. Sophia sensed the warmth of her touch. Even through the multiple layers of bandages, she longed to express her thoughts. Something yearned to recognize the whirlwind of emotions that had just unfolded between them. Yet Helena was resolutely closing her off. Her shoulders were stiff, her jaw tight. Every movement screamed of distance. That shouldn't have bothered Sophia. Wasn't the sort to pursue what was eluding her. Yet this time, for some inexplicable reason, she felt compelled to extend her hand and she leaned back against the bed, a smirk playing on her lips. So, is this how you treat all your favorite patients? Helena paused for just a fraction of a second. Then, without looking up, she responded, You're not my favorite patient. Sophia smiled. I believe I am, Helena. She neither confirmed nor denied it. Yet her gaze avoided meeting hers, and that spoke volumes. It wasn't until Sophia was officially. The silence between them grew unbearable as they stood in the hospital hallway, her dressed once more in the familiar attire. In her civilian attire, she adjusted the strap of her sling as Helena stood a few feet away, arms folded, clipboard clutched tightly to her chest, as if it were a protective barrier. This was the moment. In that moment, she chose silence, a smirk playing on her lips. Well, Doc, I suppose it is here that we bid farewell. Helena acknowledged. You will need to return for subsequent appointments. Indeed, Sophia tilted her head. Her gaze probing her face was that a nuanced hint being conveyed. You'll miss me. Helena huffed, exasperated but not annoyed. I don't do sentimental. Sophia's smile wavered just a bit. She ought to have anticipated that response from Helena. With meticulous care, she constructed barriers and fortified them with steel. Sophia had spent her entire life dismantling obstacles, yet an instinct whispered that this one was unlike any other. Marking the first time for a long time, she sensed something eluding her defenses, an intangible force she couldn't quite comprehend how to combat. With a heavy breath, she exhaled through her nose. She adopted a more playful tone. Just in case you reconsider, she retrieved a small card from her back pocket, deftly flipping it between her fingers. Her number. Helena paused, her breath caught in the moment, before she gradually extended her hand and grasped it. The very tips of their fingers grazed against each other. A fleeting touch, and Sophia, she despised the impact it had on her. Taking a step back, she nodded and said, "See you around, Doc." As the hospital doors swung shut, a profound ache settled within Sophia, one she couldn't attribute to the circumstances surrounding her. The bullet wound, the cool night air, should have felt liberating, yet it felt unsettling. She strolled to her car, idly tossing her keys between her fingers, attempting to dispel the heaviness that settled in her chest. This was the moment when she was meant to let go, yet her thoughts were consumed by the doctor she had left behind and the uncertainty of what could have been. Not she merely erred in allowing her to leave. Helena was not meant to experience this. She had managed countless. Individuals observed their arrival and departure with little consideration. It was merely part of the role to mend them, let them go, move on. Yet, it had been 3 days since Sophia walked out of the hospital, and Helena still found herself gazing at the tiny card resting on her desk. Her number, it was absurd. She wasn't the sort to linger on matters, particularly not on a reckless, maddening, a police officer, seemingly courting danger. Yet Helena reached for the card, running her thumb over the edges. She knew she should throw it away. That would be the sensible choice. Instead, she tucked it away into her drawer, just in case that night she dreamed of sirens. She found herself back in. The antiseptic scent hung heavily in the air as the doors creaked open for the first time. Paramedics burst onto the scene, urgency in their every move. A gurney in tow. A gunshot wound marred the left shoulder, blood pooling ominously. Everywhere Sophia Helena attempted to move, yet her feet refused to cooperate, and her hands. She remained still, unable to reach her. The heart monitor emitted a deafening flatline. Endless beeping jolted Helena awake, her heart racing and breath quickening. It was merely a dream, just a dream. She pressed a hand to her forehead, exhaling slowly. Accept it. It was merely a fleeting illusion. For the first time, the fear of losing someone gripped her heart. The hospital felt strangely out of the ordinary. It was a tranquil morning, yet Helena's thoughts were anything but. She navigated her routine on autopilot, attempting and failing to dispel the turmoil within her mind, the unease gripping her heart. She wasn't naive. She understood exactly what this was. It was one thing to feel an attraction to someone. It was quite another to allow oneself to genuinely care, and she had no right to let herself care about someone akin to Sophia, for she embodies those who leap into peril, who dive headfirst into the flames without hesitation. Hesitation was a fleeting shadow. She had discovered that truth through experience. Yet, despite that knowledge, her fingers danced over her phone, a restless urge compelling her to check again and again, gazing at the yard doors, anticipating something special, yearning for a spark of inspiration. She watched Sophia walk through them, a sense of urgency gripping her. It was imperative to put a stop to this before it spiraled further. But then, inevitably, it only escalated. That evening, as she completed the charts, the overhead speakers crackled to life with an urgent announcement. Incoming trauma. GW officer down. Helena felt her stomach drop as she instinctively rushed toward the air entrance, propelled by a sudden urgency when a door swung open. And then she saw her, Sophia, blood soaking through her tactical vest, her face a ghostly pale. Her breathing was shallow, and Helena's heart slammed against her ribs. Not again. A nurse named Helena sprang into action, her hands already in motion, her voice commanding attention. With a piercing clarity, the scene unfolded as Sophia's eyes fluttered open, thrusting her into the depths of her trauma, hazy and unfocused. Yet when they fixed their gaze on Helena, a subtle shift occurred. The grin suggested, "You'd mend me once more." Helena felt a constriction in her throat. It wasn't amusing. Not at all. In that moment, she took hold of Sophia's hand instinctively, oblivious to the eyes that might be watching. "Stay with me," she murmured, her voice softer than she intended, a whisper of vulnerability in Sophia's tone. Fingers intertwined with hers, and then her eyes fluttered closed. A smooth line, a solitary infinity. Beep! Helena's heart raced. No, she forced aside the urgency, forced aside all that was superfluous. Not today. Push to 200, she commanded. The defibrillator pads pressed against Sophia's chest delivered a jolt, yet there was no response. Once more, a jarring silence enveloped the room. Helena clenched her jaw, urging herself onward. Come on. Damn it! Then a beep, a heartbeat faint yet there. Helena breathed out unsteadily, clutching the edge of the bed. Sophia remained present as the team moved around her. And for the first time, Helena, uncertainty gripped her as she contemplated the implications of it all. The heart monitor's steady beeping echoed in the room. Too slow, too fragile, yet steady. Helena remained motionless, her hands firmly clutching the edge of the hospital bed. Knuckles turned white. Her mind was a quiet void, suspended in the fleeting moments before the beep. A profound dread enveloped her as Sophia lay motionless, her breath barely whispering through the silence. Her lips appeared pale under the unforgiving fluorescent lights, giving her an altered look, still vulnerable, as if stripped of the reckless energy that characterized her. Enveloped Helena as she swallowed hard, the weight of the past few minutes pressing heavily upon her ribs. She had nearly lost her. That thought should have been manageable. Helena had lost patience before she realized the regulations of this profession, the harshness of it. Yet this was more than just a patient. This was Sophia. Helena's hands clenched tightly. She had to escape this room. Yet hours slipped away unnoticed as the ER settled into its familiar rhythm. Yet Helena remained, still grappling with the aftermath. One remained in the chair beside Sophia's bed. She wasn't meant to be here. Her shift had ended. Yet here she was. She found it impossible to turn away. Sophia's chest rose and fell in slow, measured movements, accompanied by the steady beep with the heart monitor as her sole source of comfort. Helena leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees, rubbing a hand over her face. She knew she had to pull herself together. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her, but leaving was not an option. As Sophia neared, Helena tightly shut her eyes, refusing to let the moment unfold. The sentence lingered, not even forming in her own thoughts, while the chair creaked softly beneath her as she moved, releasing a measured breath. I pondered why this woman had to be so infuriatingly elusive, unaware. She was complicating Helena's existence. Helena released a soft sigh, an unamused chuckle, shaking her head at her own folly, followed by a deep, deliberate breath. With a soft groan, Helena's head jerked upward, her attention captured by the subtle movement of Sophia's fingers, her brow furrowed as if emerging from a deep slumber. And then her dark eyes fluttered open. Helena was unaware that she had been holding her breath until the heaviness in her chest finally dissipated. Sophia blinked. Slowly, her gaze drifted, initially unfocused, until a flicker of recognition sparked a faint, weary smirk, pulled at her lips. "Hey, Doc," the sound of her voice, even weak, resonated, and hoarse asterisk unraveled something in the depths of his chest. A hellish revelation. She swallowed hard, her voice cutting through the air sharper than she had meant it to be. "You almost died," she said. Sophia let out a soft sigh, adjusting her position in bed. "Well, that wasn't my finest idea." "Helena," she exhaled through her nose, clearly not in the mood for humor. "You flatlined," Sophia said, taking a brief pause. Sophia's gaze flickered, a subtle shift in her demeanor as the humor faded. "I'm sorry," she said, whispered softly. Helena was taken aback, her gaze fixed on her in disbelief. Words caught in her throat, and before she could hold back, she murmured, "You scared me." Sophia froze, and in that instant, there was an absence of jest and arrogance. Only Sophia gazing at Helena as if she comprehended the significance of those words with clarity. With deliberate caution, she extended her hand. Her good arm brushed against Helena's wrist. Helena remained still, not pulling away, not moving, not even breathing. And then softly, with great caution, as if gauging the delicacy of a fragile object, Sophia intertwined their fingers, causing Helena's pulse to quicken. Sophia's grip was feeble yet intentional, a quiet promise that she was present, that she existed, alive. Helena closed her eyes for half a second, then exhaling softly, she squeezed. In the stillness of that hospital room, silence enveloped them, and words were unnecessary. Something profound had changed between them. There was an undeniable finality to it, and Helena understood that there was no turning back from this moment. Sophia's fingers remained intertwined with Helen's, both of them frozen in time, as if minutes had stretched into hours, perhaps in the stillness of that hospital room. Helena ought to have distanced herself by now. She should have spoken up. An air of detachment, a sense of formality, an urge to reverse the instant before reality set in. Yet it was already too vivid. Her fingers tightened just slightly around Sophia's, and Sophia, still pale, still recovering, still completely and utterly alive, looked at her as if she perceived it all, the weariness, the trepidation, the release, the emotions Helena had meticulously confined to sealed containers now lay exposed. For a brief instant, silence enveloped them, until Sophia's thumb gently grazed Helena's knuckles, soft, almost imperceptible, yet charged with unspoken emotion, enough to make Helena's pull falter. "I meant what I said," Sophia murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Weary and worn, Helena's brow creased ever so slightly, revealing her vulnerability. With a smirk, "You think you're the one who'll patch me up?" Helena exhaled through her nose, releasing a breath, too unsteady to be mistaken for indifference. "This isn't amusing, Sophia." I recognize her smirk, faded, leaving only a stark and unvarnished truth behind, raw, open, and terrifyingly honest. "Helen is swallowed. You could have perished." "I understand." Sophia's fingers tightened around hers. "Yet Helena didn't shake her head, her jaw tight. "That's not the point." Sophia's gaze didn't waver. Then what was the purpose of Helena's terror? What was it that haunted her so? For a full 60 seconds, she believed she had lost her, and it felt as though the very ground had crumbled beneath her feet, leaving her in a void of despair. She dedicated 3 days to feigning indifference, only to uncover the truth within a mere 3 seconds. She had been deceiving herself all along. She remained silent, unable to articulate her thoughts, while Sophia observed her closely. Her gaze pierced through. "Did you care?" she murmured, and Helena's breath caught. "You care?" Sophia whispered once more, her voice gentle, as if the mere utterance of those words could untangle all that Helena had been concealing. Fingers danced against hers. She ought to deceive, divert, reject. Yet her voice emerged. In silence, I hesitated, not wanting to disturb the moment. Sophia's lips parted slightly, and for an instant, she appeared lost in thought, surprised. Then a subtle shift in her demeanor rendered her expression inscrutable. Save for Helena deciphered it flawlessly. A change was afoot, something unavoidable. As Sophia allowed it to unfold, let go of her hand only to reach for her face instead. And Helena didn't pull away. Fingertips grazed her jaw, light and tentative at first, offering her the opportunity to retreat. Yet Helena remained still, didn't want to, and as Sophia tilted her chin up, Helena closed. The distance the kiss lacked softness. It was neither cautious, nor hesitant, nor careful. It encompassed all that Helena had chosen not to articulate, all that she had concealed beneath layers of reason, decorum, and trepidation. It was a relief, a choice that Sophia exhaled softly against her lips, tilting into the moment. The kiss felt as though it had been anticipated, as if she had been longing for it just as she had for Helena. And Helena, despite every instinct, the boundaries she had meticulously constructed for her own protection guided her like never before. She allowed herself to desire, and when they finally separated, their foreheads touched, breaths intertwining in the shared space. Between them lay an unbridgeable chasm. Helena understood that there was no turning back. Not from this moment, not from her. Sophia released a soft, breathless laugh, her eyes still shut. "Guess so? You're holding on to me, are you?" Helena exhaled, a sound that was part laugh, part sigh. Completely yielding, it seemed, Sophia smiled widely as Helena at long last, relented. Her smile lingered as Sophia's fingers intertwined with Helena's. A connection that neither of them could ignore had drifted for what seemed like minutes, perhaps hours. In the stillness of that hospital room, Helena ought to have distanced herself from by now. She should have articulated something precise, something measured. An expert in the craft, she found herself in that fleeting instant before reality set in. Yet it was already undeniable. Her fingers clenched tighter, just slightly around Sophia's, and Sophia still pale, still recovering, still completely and utterly alive. She gazed at her as if she perceived everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the relief. Emotions Helena had meticulously confined to hidden compartments now lay exposed. For a brief instant, silence enveloped them, until Sophia's thumb gently grazed his. Fingers brushed lightly, almost imperceptibly, yet enough to send Helen's heart racing. "What I said," Sophia murmured, her voice rough with fatigue. Helena's brow furrowed, just a hint of a weak smirk at the thought of you being the one to patch me up. Helena, she exhaled through her nose, a breath too shaky to penetrate his indifference. This isn't funny, Sophia said, her smirk betraying her amusement. Faded, leaving only truth behind, raw, open, terrifying truth. Helena swallowed. You could have perished. I understand. Sophia's finger tightened around hers, yet I did not. Helena, she shook her head, her jaw clenched. That's not the point. Sophia's gaze remained unwavering. What was the reason that Helena had been filled with terror for a full 60? In those fleeting moments, she feared she had lost her, and it felt as if the very earth had crumbled away from beneath her. She had devoted 3 days were spent in a futile attempt to mask her indifference, only to have a fleeting moment reveal the truth she had been denying all along. Unsure of how to express her thoughts, she remained silent, while Sophia observed her intently. Through her, "Did you care?" she murmured. Helena's breath caught. "You care," Sophia repeated with a gentler cadence, as if the mere utterance of those words could untangle all that Helena had been concealing. Her fingers danced against his. She ought to deceive, to sidestep, to refuse. Yet her voice emerged. Out in silence, I hesitated. Sophia's lips parted just a fraction for an instant as her expression shifted from surprise to a gentle softness, indecipherable. Yet Helena deciphered it flawlessly. A change occurred. A shift in the air. Inevitable. Sophia released her hand, her fingers now seeking the contours of her face instead. Helena's fingertips grazed her jaw, light and hesitant at first, allowing her the opportunity to pause, to withdraw. Yet Helena found herself unable to do so, unwilling to part ways. And as Sophia leaned in, with her chin held high, Helena bridged the gap. The kiss was neither gentle nor tentative, or uncertain or cautious. It was all that Helena had chosen not to express, all that she had been concealed under layers of reason and decorum, intertwined with trepidation. It was a release, a decision that Sophia breathed out into the world, her lips tilted into the kiss, as if she had been yearning for it, as if she had been longing for Helena and Helena, defying every instinct, every rule, every barrier she had ever built to protect herself. Constructed allowed her for the first time she permitted herself to desire. And when they ultimately, foreheads gently separated yet still touching, breaths intertwining in the delicate space that lay between them, Helena understood that there was no turning back. Not from this, not from herself. Sophia released a soft, breathless laugh, her eyes remaining shut. I suppose that signifies, you're holding on to me. Huh? Helena exhaled a sound that was part laugh, part sigh, completely yielding. It seemed so. Sophia beamed, and at last, Helena allowed herself to return the smile. A week later, Helena emerged from the hospital, the crisp evening air enveloping her. She typically didn't anticipate leaving work, but tonight was different. As she approached the end of the parking lot, a sense of excitement bubbled within her. A figure leaned against her car, arms crossed, a grin on her face as if she owned the world. Sophia was alive, fully present, waiting by Helena's side, shaking her head. Yet she was already, with a warm smile, Sophia opened the passenger door. Come on, Doc, I owe you dinner, she said, invitingly, paused, then inhaled deeply. Asterisk. Asterisk. Embracing the plunge, asterisk. She stepped forward, a determined glint in her eye, and didn't look back. Hi everyone, she said, her smile radiant. With a warm smile, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to each of you who have already subscribed to the channel. Your support truly means the world to me. Your presence and engagement with the tales I weave inspire me to continue crafting and refining my art each day. Welcome to this channel, where we delve into captivating narratives brimming with rich details and unforgettable moments. Truly resonate. I'm diligently crafting each narrative to be even more immersive and compelling, and with characters that genuinely draw you in. The aim is to craft narratives that not only amuse, but also resonate deeply. If you find value in what you're experiencing, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing to spread the inspiration. Your insights are invaluable and contribute significantly to my growth and development. Thank you once again for your support. Here, you truly create an impact. Red Art. Let's continue to share these remarkable stories. Narratives intertwined,